I was expecting a few more people, but what I'll do, Serena, if it's all right with you, I'll just introduce in terms of a bit of a blurb, and people may come through the door in the meantime. Welcome everybody to this joint session hosted by the New Anglia LEP and the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. My name's Ellen Goodwin and I am the LEP's Clean Growth Lead. I'm sure you already know this, but I wanted to start by outlining a little bit more about our clean growth ambition. Norfolk and Suffolk has a clear role to play in the clean growth agenda, one that we believe is not replicated in any other location. We are home to the all-energy coast of the UK's breadbasket and home to many digital ICT R&D innovations, which means that we can really lead the way in driving the change needed in this, the decisive decade. As such, we've looked at length at where we can collaborate and add value in this space through the creation of our Clean Growth Task Force. The task force is made up of key players, including entrepreneurs and innovators, the public sector and the education sector, broadly reflecting our collaborative governance across the wider partnership. The task force is focused on an evidence-based approach to delivery, one that looks to support business, decarbonise transport and develop our workforce for the future. That being said, we understand that decarbonising heat is a significant piece of the puzzle and one that we need to overcome in the medium to longer term. That's why we're hosting this webinar today, to offer guidance and support in this space and help drive interest and hopefully successful bids to this, the 12th round of feasibility funding from the Heat Networks Delivery Unit. Heat networks are something that aren't hugely familiar to us in Norfolk and Suffolk, but as the decarbonisation of heat is going to be crucial to helping to deliver on our collective net zero ambitions, we thought that inviting Serena from the department was a good way to increase knowledge and awareness and help address any questions about scope, eligibility and timescales that you might have. So I think that was all I wanted to say, just at a very high level. It's a relatively informal session today. Serena is relatively local to us. She's based down in Essex, so I'm going to hand over to her, and I know she's really keen to see some projects come forward through this funding stream. So over to you, Serena. Welcome.
Lovely. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm very excited to be here today to present to you the newly launched, the recently launched Heat Network Delivery Unit Round 12 funding. So I'm Terina Conradi. I form part of the Heat Network Delivery Unit within BEIS. And I'm going to now try and share my screen because I've got a few slides. I always find it easier to kind of explain things if you've got a chart up or an illustration. So just bear with me while I share my screen. Okay, is that I can't see the Zoom screen, so Ellen, can you maybe just tell me if you can see that?
We can indeed, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I kind of already covered this slide saying who I am, and I'm with the Heat Network Delivery Unit. We love our acronyms, so we do call it H&DU. So you'll hear H&DU being referenced quite a few times through the talk. So perfect. So just a quick little overview of the kind of stages of heat network support that we at central government offer. So first we offer under the H&DU umbrella, we offer the exploration into the feasibility of a heat network opportunity within a given area, which can then develop into a detailed project development. That all falls under the H&DU umbrella, which can then also open pathways into private investment via the Beehive function that we also run, which is the BEIS Heat Investment Vehicle. And that can lead into capital grant funding for the commercialization and the construction of a heat network opportunity under the Green Heat Network Fund. So there we have another acronym, GHNF, which is our Green Heat Network Fund. I'm going to predominantly focus on H&DU and the process and the grant funding that's available under that umbrella. However, I'm happy to cover any questions that anyone may have with regards to Beehive or GHNF, and I will try and address them as best as I possibly could. If I'm unable to answer any of the questions, I'm happy to take it away and get back to you with clarification. So just before we go into the detail of Hmdu, just to kind of give an idea of our ambition under the Heat Network Transformation Programme, where we've committed £338 million of funding. Under these, we've got schemes like the Green Heat Network Fund for capital funding to accelerate kind of the decarbonisation of heat networks, as the Green Heat Network Fund will mainly focus on low to zero carbon heat networks. We are also busy working on a heat network zoning pilot program. So for those of you who may not be familiar, we've consulted on a heat network zoning policy where we will identify where heat networks are identified as the lowest cost, low carbon solution to heating in that particular area, which will then subsequently lead to legislation where in that zone some buildings and heat sources may be mandated to connect. So we're busy working on a pilot to develop a national methodology on how we will identify these zones, and we are actually working with Norwich on this pilot. So we have some Norfolk representation, which I'm really happy to see with this pilot. Also happy again to address any questions around the heat network zoning policy and or pilot if time allows. So, and we also, for any existing heat networks, we've got the to help them improve performance. We also have the Heat Network Efficiency Scheme, which is due to launch next year in 2023. And as part of this, we work with the supply chain to increase skills and capacity to deliver these projects as we try and move from a 3% market share to a 20% market share by 2050. It's an ambitious goal, but I think working collaboratively and working with key stakeholders, we should be able to achieve that by 2050. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on kind of the heat network support that we have under the Hmdu umbrella, which is the exploration of the feasibility of a heat network, which can then progress into a detailed project development, or what we also refer to as a DPD. So a little bit of background of Hmdu. It was started in 2013 with the main purpose of supporting local authorities along the journey of heat network development stages to help them realize the benefits of a heat network opportunity in the local authority. We've supported over 250 schemes. We have offered over £30 million of grant funding, and we're now at round 12. Oh, excuse me. I almost wanted to sneeze there. So we're now at round 12, and and it's due to close in December 2022. We offer funding waves at the end of each month. So you should have about 7 or 8 opportunities to apply for funding within this round. And we now work in parallel with the Beehive investment pathway to see whether any private investment can come in with these funding, with these opportunities to support local authorities to deliver these projects. One of the biggest change for the round 12 grant funding, where historically Hmdu only funded local authorities, we've now expanded the eligible organisations that can apply for funding to include registered social landlords, NHS trusts, universities, other government departments, and property developers. We see them as key stakeholders to help the growth of the market and to help to deliver heat networks. And we're quite excited to get some funding from these project sponsors to see how this can help grow the market. So let's go in a little bit. So the scope of support for the Hmdu is we provide specialist guidance, which is kind of I form one of the Hmdu roles, where we support local authorities and project sponsors along the journey, providing them guidance. And you know, we've got experts within the team, technical experts, commercial experts, legal experts, that can kind of just handhold the project sponsor through the process. Some are a lot more familiar with heat networks, some are perhaps not as familiar, so they need more guidance from our specialists during the process. The feasibility part of the Hmdu grant funding will look at a detailed technical appraisal and economic viability assessment of the opportunity to lead into the detailed project development, looking at commercial modeling, legal structuring, discussing kind of draft heads of terms with buildings that will connect to the heat network, procurement, and those kind of detail. And we also fund external project management for public bodies, public sector bodies, and registered social landlords. But to go in a little bit more detail with what the Hmdu process kind of looks like. So the feasibility study, as we mentioned, it is a technical appraisal and an economic viability assessment, is where we would procure consultants to look at the demand. So all the buildings that would potentially connect, all the residential, commercial, non-domestic, all those kind of buildings that could potentially connect to the heat network. It will look at a low to zero carbon heat source in the area that can supply the heat to the demand. It will then look at an area, land, where an energy center can be built to house the equipment to generate the heat. And then it will look at proposed pipe routing on, well, how do we connect all these three things? So that's where the technical side to look, is it technically viable? Can we technically kind of deliver a heat network? Then we'll look at the economics of a heat network. Well, how much is this going to cost me? What's the capex? What return can I expect on this investment, with this opportunity? And can we economically deliver this project? So the feasibility stage takes around about 6 to 8 months to complete. And from round 12, we're not funding the previous stage, which we call the mapping and master planning. So we would encourage kind of applicants to present a strong opportunity on application. If a local authority or a project sponsor is relatively unfamiliar with heat networks, we're happy to support them and just give a quick overview of where the opportunities are to support them through into the feasibility study. So at the end of the feasibility study, it will provide the project sponsor with a detailed analysis of an opportunity to enable them to make a decision on how they wish to progress. So do they wish to progress straight to the Green Heat Network Fund, which in some of the project sponsors that would be, you would be able to do that as long as you can evidence the required governance and the required sign off and agreement to go to the Green Heat Network Fund. Most local authorities will go through to the detailed project development stage to assess whether this is an opportunity that the local authority would like to invest in. So the detailed project development is broken into 3 areas. So 3 options, basically at the end of the feasibility study for the local authority to decide how they wish to progress. So the full DPD is where the consultants will build an outline business case in line with HMT Green Book, and it will go into the commercial side, the legal aspects, further technical optimization of the opportunity, financial assessment. So where's the money going to come from? And then at the end of that, with the outlined business case, it then provides the local authority with the opportunity to then invest into the project. It's ideal for local authorities who feel they have the funds to invest and they want to play an active role in the delivery, the maintenance and the operation of the heat network long term. So where the local authority feel at the end of feasibility feel they may not have the funds to invest into the project, but they do still want to play some form of a role, and some control, you can go via the concession model. Concession model is where funding will go towards the development of tender documents to take it out to the market to then bid to come and deliver the heat network. The heat network will still essentially be owned by the local authority, but it will just be for the duration of the concession contract, will be adopted by the market to manage and operate it during that time. So that's ideally, as I mentioned, for local authorities who feel they want some level of involvement, but they don't have the funds to invest in it. The third option is ideal for a local authority who feel they don't have the internal capacity or resources or appetite to operate or be involved in the project, and they also don't have the funds to invest in the opportunity, is to then, during that stage, the consultants will build a lighter outline business case that can be taken to the market to then come in and deliver the project. The key part of the DPD Light is kind of providing assurances on buildings to connect and a heat source, but it's ideal, as I mentioned, for local authorities who feel, you know, we don't really want to be involved, but we do think this is a great opportunity to support the local authority to achieve their net zero targets, as a heat network is decarbonisation at scale. So once the detailed project development is complete, either one of those three options then provides the project sponsor with a strong case to apply for the Green Heat Network Fund, where it will go into commercialisation and construction and to then get pipes in the ground. So now let's talk about money. So how much will HNDU fund of this process? So HNDU will fund 67% of eligible external costs. So that is predominantly the consultant cost for the feasibility study and any one of the three DPD studies. And we'll also fund 100% of the eligible external project management costs for public sector bodies and registered social landlords. So the 33% match funding is required from the project sponsor. We're quite flexible on where that funding comes from. It's up to the project sponsor to source that funding. There's no upper limit for public sector bodies for this funding. There's only some limits applied to non-public sector project sponsors, and as long as it aligns with the special drawing rights, and I think the limit at the moment is £332,000. It aligns with that, then they can apply for funding with HNDU. So I think I believe I've covered everything, and I'm happy to take some questions, but I will need to stop sharing my screen if I want to take any questions. Just bear with me.
Thank you, Serena. That was really detailed. Much appreciated. Has anybody got any questions for Serena?
I think there's some. I haven't looked at the chat. Is there?
Nicola wanted to know if we were able to share the slides, and I said as long as you were happy. So
yes, I'm more than happy to share that that afterwards, Nicola. Yes. I'm also happy to oh yes, Peter.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, Peter Gurdy from the Greater South East Net Zero Hub, and we're very keen to support the development of heat networks within the Greater South East. And in that respect, if there are any prospective local authorities or public sector organisations looking to enter into research around their specific sites, or more generically, we're happy to assist you in whatever path you want to take, particularly if it's towards support from the HNDU. So firstly, that's a plug for what we could hopefully provide to you. Secondly, really, it was a question really, Tarina, around the changes in the eligibility for non-local authorities in terms of how the money flows through. Previously, we knew some schemes, they could go to the local authority, then the money could be passported through. But you've changed the arrangement slightly so that there's a wider catchment, a wider opportunity, and you've had to find a slightly different way for that money to flow through to the recipients. Is it possible for you to just expand on that a bit?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Peter. And that's actually a really, really good question, a really good point to raise. So with local authority applicants, the grant funding works on a Section 31 agreement, so which is quite simple. The local authority will draw down the funds from central government and will get the whole pot in one go, basically. And it's then up to the local authority to allocate that funding to what they've agreed with under the MOU. So the local authority will sign an MOU with the H&DU team and then agree on there how they're going to use that money, spend the money, and allocate the money accordingly. With non-local authority bodies, it is a Section 98 agreement, which is slightly different. So on this, with this funding, it's not a drawdown like the lump sum in one go that you can draw down. It is at certain stages that you can draw down. I think it's once at the end of the project. If you do need to draw down the funding earlier, we can have a discussion. We can see if we can arrange that. But it's usually you need to evidence that the money has been spent. Or you can also draw down quarterly if some of these projects take quite long. Some of these studies are sometimes up to 12 months. So you can potentially draw down quarterly. It's worth discussing it with the H&DU lead, how best to do that. But it is, you need to prove that the money has been spent, and then you can draw down the money in accordance with the spend.
Thank you.
Any other questions or queries?
Hi there, Serena. It's Darryl Newport from the University of Suffolk. I was just interested, we've been working with Siemens recently and looking at the opportunities of alternative energy solutions. Could we utilise Siemens as our specialist and then claim back the feasibility aspect of this through the fund?
So with the H&DU funding, we recommend to use consultants that's registered with SIPSI. Okay. Under their heat network registration, so they're registered under that registration. If you can evidence that Siemens is registered under that, we're open on which on using them as your consultant to provide you with advice.
Okay, so it's a SIPSI register that we should look at.
Yes, there's a specific heat networks registration, and as long as they also work in line with the I can't get to the guidance now, the heat network guidance. Okay. There's, I think it's COP, yeah, CEO. I keep wanting, I can't get to the name now. I've got a complete blank now. So many acronyms flowing in my head, floating around in my head. Yes, there's also that guidance that was developed by SIPSI. So as long as they work also in line with those with that guidance. CP1, there we go. CP1, I remembered now.
Cheers, Serena.
Nicola.
Thank you. I'm Nicola Turner from Great Yarmouth Borough Council. I just wondered if there was a minimum number of homes on a heat network.
So there isn't a minimum. So are you referring to for the application, or?
Yes.
Or
so if we were looking at if we were going to make an application, would you be expecting that to be for a minimum of X homes? Thanks.
So we're trying to kind of just limit it to kind of we're looking at kind of the larger scale heat networks. So we're looking at about 2 gigawatt hours a year. I can't say really how many. I would say probably about 100 dwellings. I would say so. It's kind of very much in line with our Green Heat Network Fund metrics, where they say that if you come in, it needs to be at least 2 gigawatt hours a year for a densely populated area. For rural or more urban, where they're looking at 100. I think it's 100 dwellings. So let's say the minimum will be about 100. Alternatively, what you can do is you can maybe aggregate your projects to say, well, we've got 5 different areas that we want to look at. And by aggregating them, it can bring you up to that 2 gigawatt hours or the 100 dwellings. But if you've got an opportunity, you want to discuss in more detail, happy to have a look and see how we can get you to that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Oh yeah. So it was just that I'm particularly interested in a new project called the Shelf Project, which is in Stowmarket in Suffolk. And the Shelf Project is sports and health and wellbeing orientated. It's a £12 million project which involves building extra buildings both for the NHS and also pavilions for sports and sports facilities, and that is going to be beside a new development of houses. And so we're very interested in whether we can, when you say about 100 dwellings, whether we can connect in to a heat network in with those buildings that the council will own, or as well as buildings that the council intend to lease to the NHS, and as well as in with talking to the developer about extending the heat network into the houses. So can we engage with that sort of complexity?
Yes, we'll be happy to kind of look at providing some support to see. So let me just see if I understand correctly. So the developer is already building a heat network at the new development, and you were looking at a study to see, well, how to expand it to the homes, or is it that you want to look at building a heat network to cater for the new builds as well as the homes in the area?
Yeah, it will be. There's some existing buildings on the edge of the site, which are both NHS and public sector, and then there's also going to be some new builds. And so, the debate about the feasibility is to whether the heat network should be spread into the existing buildings or just for the new build.
Okay. Yeah, I think it sounds like an opportunity to come in for some funding to do a more detailed feasibility study, to have a look at how the connection of the existing buildings will impact the technical feasibility and the economic assessment of it. We usually always recommend to get more demand onto a heat network. It does help with the efficiency and the economics. So that could be a good opportunity to come forward. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or queries at this stage?
Go
on,
my
Peter.
hand. Oh, sorry, Nicola, you go first.
You first, Peter.
All I was going to say, Serena, obviously there have been a lot of projects that have gone through the process with HNDU since 2013, and it'd be great if we could access any examples of previous studies that have been done, and appreciate some of those may be commercially confidential, but also templates for specifications. And I know you, for one project, you've sent over a template specification for some feasibility study that I've done. It'd be really helpful if we could identify those documents so that it would speed up the process of getting applications together. Yes,
so we do publish the H&DU pipeline, which is on our website. I'll post the link in the chat. You can have a look at all the projects that we are working on that's progressed through to construction, that we have worked on as well. So it gives you a really clear picture of the interesting projects that we've been working on. And one that jumps to mind, which is also a more of a rural project, is in Swaffham Prior in Cambridge, which we supported through to capital funding under the Heat Networks investment program, where there were all the homes are connecting to a heat network. And if I recall correctly, it's a ground source heat pump, if I recall correctly. I wasn't directly involved with the project, So there are some really interesting projects that we have supported through the whole process. And like I said, I'll put the link in the chat. We also offer specification for procurement of consultants. We generally only share that once a project's been successful for grant funding, but there's no reason we can't supply it beforehand. By all means, that wouldn't be a problem. It gives you a very good idea of what's expected of the consultant during a feasibility study, and the detail of work that's required to be delivered at the end. So it does give a very good overview of what's involved. Let me just get that link.
Nicola, do you want to come back in?
Thank you. It's just a question. Could you submit more than one application for feasibility funding?
So in one funding round,
or in multiple rounds, in either?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
So if we've had it before where, so if, for instance, you've applied for a specific project on feasibility, and the feasibility is done, and 2 years later you want to redo it because there has been fundamental changes in the area, you can come back in. We just ask that you justify why you're asking for requesting for that money for that project on a second occasion. And if you can justify to say there's been a major new development in the area or something along those lines, then yes, if the justification is there, then yes, you can apply for the same project at a later stage.
Thanks. I was just thinking about 2 potential projects within, say, one funding round or subsequent funding rounds, just because I can think of 2 projects across the council which we might want to look at. So I thought I'd rather ask now than not ask.
Yes. Yeah, that you can do. You can come in for one project, and then let's say 2-3 months later, another opportunity is presented itself. You can come in for another for funding. So it's a council is not limited to one application per round. We just ask that if you're applying for funding for the same project, that you just need to tell us why. We understand things change, and we understand that major changes happen. You just need to tell us, give us the detail as to that reasoning.
Thank you.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, apologies, me again. Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've seen across the southeast is the lack of capacity within the marketplace with regard to project management support at all stages in project management, hence partly why we're here, but also with regard to heat networks and the way that they move through to commercialisation, the different quality and needs around the project management changes as you move through. And some local authorities particularly struggle with capacity to be able to sustain a park post with that. And I know there's some facility within the HNDU funding round to allow that project management to be supported, which it has to be additional to the local authority provision. So one of the things we were going to explore is how we could, as a hub, facilitate the increase in that provision, that capacity in the locality. And one of the areas we're particularly interested in is a sort of sharing of capacity between local authorities who are running projects that could potentially be supported by the project management, 100% project management funding that you offer. Is that something that would be a possibility? And B, are there any people on the call today who may well be taking projects forward that are in the same time bands that may be interested in around that sort of sharing of resource? So it's a question to you, but then it's also just a general point out to people on the call. Thank you.
Yes, I think we would welcome that because I think Peter, with your knowledge of the local area and your knowledge of more kind of holistic approach, knowing of other net zero kind of projects happening within the council, it could collaborate. It could work quite well. So we would definitely be open to working together with the hubs in project managing the projects. It's also worth considering that if a local authority is is keen on taking this forward is to also, because ideally we want to retain the knowledge and the experience in-house. And this infrastructure project is easily a 5 to 10 year project. So to try and develop the in-house kind of expertise, knowledge, and to kind of see if that can be developed alongside the project, to see if a business case can be built for someone to look after it permanently, because it's a big project and you need that internal kind of knowledge to retain throughout the process. So yes, we happily support external capacity, because we appreciate that local authority colleagues are stretched and they are under-resourced, but it's also an opportunity to kind of showcase, to say, well, we want to deliver this really good project. There's a need to have someone in-house permanently.
Anything else for Tarina? I can't see any other hands or anybody shouting. So in the chat, Tarina's put her contact details, as has Peter. So please feel free to get in touch with either of them if you have any questions or queries, as well as the link on some of the projects that have already been supported. I think if there aren't any more questions, what I'll do is I'll make sure that I send some follow-up emails just with those details, the presentation and that kind of thing, and the recording as of interest to people. And if there's any questions or queries, please do not hesitate to get in touch, I guess. And very happy to support from our perspective as well, if that would be useful for colleagues on the call. But otherwise, I think we'll draw it to a close. So thank you very much, Tarina, for joining us today. That was really helpful and really insightful, certainly much more detailed than I was aware of. So much appreciated. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Tarina. Bye.